You may have heard some of the headlines that being resistant to insulin is now proving to be one of the biggest hidden risk factors for getting cancer. Here's the problem: you don't become resistant to insulin just by eating too much sugar. It's not just something that people with diabetes have to worry about. Over 80% of adults have some degree of resistance to insulin, and most don't even realize it. The bad news is that being insulin resistant can increase your cancer risk by 2 to 3 times. But the good news is that it's reversible. So if you're serious about preventing cancer, beating cancer, or preventing it from coming back, lowering your resistance to insulin should be a top priority. But how do we do that? And what's the easiest and fastest way to do it? Well, that's exactly what I'm going over in this video. But this is actually video number 2 of this series. If you missed part 1 last week, we talked about what insulin resistance even means and why it increases your cancer risk, the early warning signs of it, and some simple but powerful ways to start reversing it naturally, like eating less refined carbs, like white bread or white pasta, and eating more fiber and healthy fats. But in this video, we're taking it a step further, because if you really want to lower your insulin resistance fast, changing your diet alone might not be enough. And that's where Dr. Thomas Seyfried comes in. He's one of the top experts on this subject, and his research has been a game changer in terms of how we think of cancer. He's revealed something that traditional medicine often overlooks, that cancer isn't just a genetic disease, it's more of a metabolic one. And what does that mean? Well, cancer cells need fuel to survive, and they get that fuel mostly from sugar, or glucose, and glutamine. Unlike your healthy cells, which can use different things for fuel, cancer cells are completely addicted to glucose and glutamine, so they can barely get any fuel to survive from anything else. So you would think that if you stopped eating sugar and glutamine, you could essentially starve cancer cells. But unfortunately, it's not that simple. Cancer cells can still get some energy from fats and protein. But according to Dr. Seyfried, that's where the keto diet, intermittent fasting, and other metabolic therapies come in. That's why I see more and more cancer survivors trying these 3 strategies. But I want to give you some really important tips in case you decide to try one of them. I want to make sure you do it in a safe and healthy way. In case you don't know me, I'm Sarah, and on this channel, I help cancer survivors stay in remission with easy-to-follow advice. I also like to post cancer-fighting tips and recipes every so often, which you can only see if you're subscribed to this channel. So you don't want to miss out on that. Okay, so let's start off with one of my favorite topics: how fasting, even intermittent fasting, can lower insulin resistance. If you've never heard of intermittent fasting before, I have some other videos on it, but think of it as giving your body a little break from constantly having to digest food, but just for long enough that you can still get all the vitamins and nutrients you need from food every day. But it's that break from eating that can work wonders for lowering your insulin levels. When you're fasting, your body doesn't have to pump out as much insulin, so it's like giving your cells a much-needed vacation from it, and it makes them become more sensitive to insulin when you do eat. So this means your cells will be able to absorb glucose and use it for energy more easily. Whereas if there's too much insulin hanging around, your cells won't be able to use glucose for energy, so it'll stay in your bloodstream and cause all kinds of dangerous inflammation. Another huge benefit of fasting after cancer is cellular repair. When you're fasting, your body goes into like a cleanup mode. It's something called autophagy, and it's like an episode of Survivor for your cells. They get rid of the damaged ones and destroy the weaker ones, including cancerous and precancerous cells. So intermittent fasting is a great way to lower insulin resistance, reduce inflammation, get rid of damaged cells, and shed some extra pounds if you need to. Losing excess body fat, especially around your midsection, can make a big difference in improving insulin resistance. Now, obviously, intermittent fasting isn't a miracle cure for cancer, and it's actually not safe for everyone. So, as always, please talk to your doctor before trying it. But if it is safe for you to do so, how do you even choose the right type of fast? There are a lot of ways to do intermittent fasting. I highly recommend starting with a 14 to 16 hour fast, which gives you an 8 to 10 hour eating window, and then slowly extend that fasting window if you can. Or there's the 5:2 method, where you only eat around 500 calories a day for 2 days of the week and eat normally for the other 5 days. When you're only eating 500 calories a day, it keeps your body in a fasting-like state. It's not as effective as going longer periods without eating, but it is an option if you're unable to go more than a few hours without food. Also, intermittent fasting is a lot more effective if you eat healthy food during your eating window. You can't just go crazy on junk food after you've fasted for 16 hours. A key part to lowering insulin resistance is eating less sugar and refined carbs and replacing them with healthy whole foods. And intermittent fasting shouldn't make you feel crummy. So don't try to force it. If you constantly feel tired or dizzy, you may just need to adjust your fasting schedule. And if fasting just isn't for you, don't sweat it. There are other ways to help you lower insulin resistance, like the keto diet. Again, this is another recommendation from Dr. Seifred. I'm actually not a huge advocate for keto because it can be dangerous if you don't do it properly, and I'll get into this more in a minute. But basically, the keto diet involves eating high amounts of fat, small amounts of protein, and even less carbs, very little carbs. So why is it so powerful against cancer? Well, if we know that cancer cells thrive on carbs and we cut them off from them, you can create an environment in your body where cancer cells don't want to hang out, because there's less insulin and inflammation to support them. And when you're eating zero sugar and very little carbs, your body shifts from using carbs for energy to using fat for energy. This puts you in a state called ketosis, where your body produces ketones from fat. Now, our normal cells have no problem using fat for energy, but cancer cells can only get a small amount of energy from fat. And your normal cells can also use ketones for energy, but cancer cells really struggle to use ketones for energy at all. So when you're in the state of ketosis, you're slowly starving cancer cells while still providing normal amounts of fuel for your healthy cells. I hope that all made sense. But you may be wondering, why not just follow a low-carb diet and cut back on sugar, rather than doing the keto diet? Great question. Although cancer cells do use carbs as their main source of fuel, they can still get some energy from protein and a little bit from fat. And this is because protein contains glutamine. Glutamine is an amino acid found in high-protein foods like meat, dairy, or legumes like beans. But fats don't contain any glutamine. So, in theory, if you're only eating fat, you're giving cancer cells very little energy to survive. However, I'm certainly not recommending that you go and eat bacon and butter all day. Please know that there's a healthy and unhealthy way to do keto, especially as a cancer survivor. You need the important vitamins and antioxidants from fruits and vegetables that also help to prevent cancer recurrence and keep you healthy. And to be honest, the keto diet is not easy for most people to stick with. It's hard to eat at restaurants, it's hard to find things to eat in general, it just doesn't give you much flexibility. So what I recommend if you're going to try keto is to do a healthy version of it. Some say that true keto is where up to 90% of your calories come from fat, but this is too extreme, in my opinion. But the good news is the majority of research says that you can stay in a state of ketosis while still eating up to 50 grams of carbs a day. So if that's the case, you can still eat fruit, non-starchy vegetables, and even some whole grains while on the keto diet. And yes, you can, and absolutely should, still eat protein, even though it contains glutamine. Just eat moderate amounts of it. Protein is so important to maintain our muscle mass and give us energy, and this is especially important as we age. Another recommendation from Dr. Seifert to starve cancer cells is to use glutamine-blocking drugs. These are called glutamine inhibitors. One of the most well-known ones is called DON, and basically, these drugs make it harder for cancer cells to use glutamine as fuel. You may have heard Dr. Seifert also talk about another type of metabolic therapy called hyperbaric oxygen therapy, which increases the oxygen levels in your body, making it harder for cancer cells to survive. During this treatment, you breathe in 100% oxygen in a pressurized chamber, and it increases the amount of oxygen that's dissolved in your blood and your tissues. I'm not going to get into the heavy science behind this, but it actually makes it difficult for cancer cells to grow. This treatment is typically used for things like carbon monoxide poisoning or severe burns, and although Dr. Seifert suggests using it to help starve cancer cells, it's not a standard practice for cancer treatment, yet. Maybe someday. Okay, so we've talked about the idea of starving cancer cells in a few different ways now, by lowering insulin resistance through intermittent fasting, doing a healthy version of the keto diet with high-quality fats, moderate amounts of protein, and less than 50 grams of carbs a day, and, under medical supervision, taking glutamine inhibitors or doing hyperbaric oxygen therapy. Now, I'm not saying any of these strategies are miracle cures, but it's great to know that there are different strategies we can use to help us beat cancer rather than just relying on treatments like chemo or radiation and hoping for the best. And by combining these strategies, you could be cutting off the fuel supply to cancer cells from different directions, making them weaker and more susceptible to cancer treatment. And I know that trying things like the keto diet or intermittent fasting can feel overwhelming. So just start small. Pick one thing from this video series to implement and go from there. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.